Commander Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense. 3,000 years of war and still no winner. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again at the data his ship had collected. The USS Endeavour floated quietly, in deep space far from Earth and far from any known conflicts. Jake's crew was supposed to be exploring new star systems, looking for planets that humans might one day call home. Instead, they had stumbled into something much bigger and much stranger. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Rodriguez from her station. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms, and her voice carried a mix of excitement and worry that Jake had learned to pay attention to. He walked over to her workstation, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The ship was quiet, except for the steady hum of engines and life support systems. Most of the crew was asleep, but Jake couldn't rest, not after what they had seen. "What is it, Lisa?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the screen. "I've been studying the battlefield debris we collected yesterday," she said, pointing to images of alien body parts floating in space. "Look at this genetic data. Both sides have been changing their soldiers for hundreds of years." Jake frowned. "Changing them how? Making them stronger, faster, more aggressive, but also less creative, less able to think of new solutions." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her keyboard, bringing up more data. "It's like they've been locked in an arms race, but instead of building better weapons, they've been rebuilding themselves." The emergency alarm suddenly filled the air with its sharp, urgent sound. Jake ran to the bridge where Lieutenant Colonel Amy Patterson was already studying the communication console. "What's happening?" Jake asked. "We're getting a distress signal," Amy replied. "It's coming from the Omega sector. Both alien fleets are there." Jake knew about the Omega sector. It was where the Kethvar Dominion and the Zephyrian Alliance had been fighting their latest battle. The two alien groups had been enemies for so long that no one remembered how the war started. They just kept fighting, year after year, century after century. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The main display showed a view of space that took Jake's breath away. Thousands of ships floated dead in the darkness. Some were the sleek, silver vessels of the Zephyrians. Others were the dark, angular ships of the Kethvar. But they were all broken, all silent. "Are there any survivors?" Jake asked. Communications officer Beth Williams worked at her station, trying to pick up any signals from the wreckage. "I'm detecting some life signs," she said, "but not many. Most of the ships are completely destroyed." Jake watched the screen, feeling sick. He had seen battles before, but nothing like this. The amount of destruction was almost impossible to understand. Millions of aliens had died here. And for what? "Captain," called Engineer Tony Clark from his station. "I'm picking up movement. 2 fleets are leaving the area." Jake looked at the display again. Tony was right. The surviving ships from both sides were flying away from the battlefield. They weren't chasing each other or continuing to fight. They were just leaving as if the battle had never happened. "That's strange," Amy said. "According to our data, both fleets had enough ships left to keep fighting. Why would they both retreat?" Jake didn't have an answer. In all his years of studying military history, he had never seen anything like this. Armies didn't just stop fighting in the middle of a battle unless something was very wrong. "Beth, can you contact both fleets?" Jake asked. "I can try," Beth replied. "But they might not want to talk to us. Humans are neutral in this war. Both sides see us as outsiders." "Try anyway," Jake said. "I want to know what happened here." Beth worked at her console for several minutes before she got a response. "I have Admiral Vextar of the Kethvar fleet," she said. Jake straightened his uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. "Put him on screen." The face that appeared on the display was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Admiral Vextar looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird, with bright yellow eyes and scales that changed color as he moved. But it was his expression that caught Jake's attention. The alien looked tired, more tired than any living being should ever be. "Human ship," Vexatar said in heavily accented English. "Why do you disturb us?" "We saw the battle," Jake replied. "We wanted to make sure you were okay." Vextar's eyes narrowed. "Okay? We have been fighting for 3,000 years. We are never okay. Then why did you retreat? Jake asked. Your fleet still had fight left in it. The alien admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost sad. Because we cannot win. We can never win. The Zephyrians are too strong, but we are too strong for them as well. We fight, we die, we fight again. Nothing changes. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? We have been fighting so long that we have forgotten why we started, Vextar said. Our children are born to be soldiers. Our planets exist only to build ships and weapons. We do not know how to do anything else. Before Jake could respond, Beth interrupted. Captain, I'm getting a signal from the Zephyrian fleet too. Put them on a separate channel, Jake said. Supreme Commander Thilla appeared on a second screen. She looked more human than Vextar, but her skin was blue and her eyes were completely black. Like the Kethvar Admiral, she looked exhausted. Human vessel, Thilla said. You should not be here. This is a war zone. We know, Jake replied. We were hoping to understand what happened. Thilla laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. What happened? The same thing that always happens. We fight, we kill each other, we retreat to repair our ships and gather more soldiers. Then we fight again. But why? Jake asked. What are you fighting for? Thilla and Vextar both looked confused by the question. Jake realized that he had both alien commanders on screen at the same time, and they were seeing each other for the first time in who knew how long. We fight because we must, Thilla said finally. We fight because it is what we do. We fight because they are our enemies, Vextar added. We have always fought them. Jake looked from one screen to the other. Both alien commanders looked like they wanted to say more, but they didn't know how. The war had become their entire existence, their only way of life. What if there was another way? Jake asked quietly. Both aliens stared at him as if he had just suggested something impossible. There is no other way, Vextar said. There has never been another way. Jake took a deep breath. His crew was watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. He thought about the millions of dead aliens floating in space behind them, and about the tired voices of the two commanders. Maybe, Jake said slowly, it's time to find one. The next morning, Jake called a meeting with his senior officers. The conference room was small but comfortable, with a large table in the center and windows that showed the stars outside. Everyone looked tired after the events of the previous day. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Patterson sat across from Jake, her hands folded on the table. She had been studying military history for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for what they had witnessed. I've been thinking about what those alien commanders said, she began. They don't know why they're fighting anymore. That's what worries me, Dr. Lisa Rodriguez added. She had dark circles under her eyes from staying up all night analyzing data. I've been looking at the genetic information we collected. Both species have been changing themselves for so long that they've lost the ability to think of peaceful solutions. Engineer Tony Clark leaned forward in his chair. I checked their ship designs too. They've been using the same battle tactics for hundreds of years. No innovation, no new ideas. Just the same fights over and over. Jake nodded slowly. So what do we do about it? Amy spread some papers on the table. I have an idea, but it's crazy. What if we offered to help them talk to each other? They were just talking to each other yesterday, Beth Williams pointed out. Through us. No, Amy said, shaking her head. I mean really talk. Not about surrender or battle plans. About why they're fighting in the first place. Lisa laughed, but not in a happy way. Amy, these two species have been enemies for 3,000 years. They probably don't even remember their own history from before the war. Exactly, Amy said. That's the problem. They're stuck in a cycle they can't break, because they don't know how it started. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Outside the window, he could see the distant glow of stars where the battle had taken place. Millions of aliens had died, there and for what? A war that no one could even explain anymore. What are you suggesting? He asked Amy. I'm suggesting we do something no one has ever tried before. We act as neutral mediators. We help them find a way to stop fighting. Tony shook his head. They'll never agree to that. To them, you're either a friend or an enemy. There's no middle ground. Then we make them understand that there can be, Amy replied firmly. Jake stood up and walked to the window. The idea was dangerous, maybe even impossible. But what was the alternative? Let two entire civilizations destroy themselves over a war they couldn't even remember starting. Beth, he said without turning around, can you contact both fleets again? Yes, sir. But they might not want to talk. Tell them we have a proposal, something that might help them both. An hour later, both alien commanders were back on screen. Admiral Vextar looked suspicious while Supreme Commander Thilla seemed annoyed. Human Captain, Vextar said, we have no time for games. We must prepare for the next battle. When will that be? Jake asked. In 2 weeks, Thilla answered. Maybe 3. We need time to repair our ships and train new soldiers. Jake felt sick. They were already planning the next battle, the next slaughter. What if there was no next battle? Both aliens stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Impossible, Vextar said. There is always a next battle. We have been fighting for 3,000 years, Thilla added. We cannot simply stop. Why not? Jake asked. What would happen if you both just didn't fight? The question seemed to confuse both commanders. They looked at each other across the communication channels, probably for the first time in decades. Our people would not understand, Vextar said slowly. We are warriors. Fighting is what we do. But what did your people do before the war? Jake pressed. 3,000 years ago, what were the Kethvar like? Vextar was quiet for a long time. I do not remember. The records from that time are lost. Jake turned to Thilla. What? About the Zephyrians? We were... Thyla paused, looking uncertain. I think we were explorers. We traveled to new worlds. But that was very long ago. And now? Jake asked. What do your people do when they're not fighting? Neither commander had an answer. Amy stepped forward. Captain Morrison, may I speak? Jake nodded. Admiral Vextar, Supreme Commander Thilla, Amy began. My name is Amy Patterson. I'm a student of military history. I've studied thousands of wars, across hundreds of worlds. Do you know what I've learned? Both aliens waited for her to continue. Every war ends eventually. Every single one. The only question is how many people die before it stops. This war is different, Vextar insisted. This war cannot end. Why not? Amy asked. What makes it different? Because... Vextar started to speak, then stopped. He looked confused, as if he was trying to remember something important, but couldn't. Because we are enemies, Thyla said, but her voice lacked conviction. But why are you enemies? Amy continued. What did the Kethvar do to the Zephyrians 3,000 years ago? What did the Zephyrians do to the Kethvar? Both commanders were silent. You don't know, do you? Amy said gently. You're fighting a war, but you don't know why it started. Jake could see the confusion and frustration on both alien faces. They had been fighting for so long that the original cause had been forgotten, lost in 3 millennia of battle and death. Here's what I propose, Jake said. Give us 30 days, 1 month. During that time, both of your fleets will observe a ceasefire. No fighting, no attacks, no preparation for battle. Impossible, both commanders said at the same time. Why? Jake asked. What's the worst that could happen? Your people get a month of peace? Our people do not know peace, Vextar said. We only know war. Then maybe it's time they learned something new, Jake replied. Lisa stepped forward. I've been studying your genetic data. Both of your species are dying. Your populations are shrinking. Your planets are being destroyed by constant warfare. If you keep fighting, there won't be anyone left to fight. That is the price of war, Thilla said. It doesn't have to be, Jake said firmly. During these 30 days, my crew will work with both of your fleets. We'll help you remember what your people were like before the war. We'll help you find solutions to your problems that don't involve killing each other. And if we are not satisfied with your mediation, Vextar asked. Then we leave, Jake said simply. We go back to our own space, and you never see us again. You can go back to fighting until one of you is completely destroyed. Both commanders were quiet for a long time. Jake could see them thinking, weighing the options. A month of peace against 3,000 years of war. Our war councils will not approve, Thyla said finally. Then don't ask them, Amy suggested. You're both supreme commanders. You have the authority to make this decision. Our people will think we are weak, Vextar worried. Your people are tired, Jake said. They're tired of fighting, tired of dying, tired of sending their children to war. Maybe they're ready for something different. The silence stretched on. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet conference room. Finally, Vextar spoke. 30 days, no attacks from either side. Thyla nodded slowly. 30 days. But if your human solutions do not work, then you go back to war, Jake finished. I understand. As the communication ended, Jake looked around at his crew. They had just agreed to try something that had never been attempted before. They were going to try to end a 3,000-year war with nothing but words and hope. Well, Tony said with a nervous smile, this should be interesting. The first week of the ceasefire was the hardest. Jake watched the reports coming in from both alien fleets, and it was clear that many soldiers didn't know what to do with themselves when they weren't preparing for battle. Captain, Beth called, from her station. I'm getting reports of fights breaking out on Kethvar ships. The soldiers are getting restless. Jake sighed. He had expected this. When your entire life revolves around war, peace can feel more frightening than battle. What, about the Zephyrians? Similar problems, Beth replied. Some of their commanders are asking permission to attack the Kethvar. They say the ceasefire is making their people weak. Amy looked up from her planning desk. We need to give them something to do, something that isn't fighting. Like what? Tony asked. These people have been soldiers for 3,000 years. They don't know how to do anything else. Lisa had been quiet all morning, studying data on her computer. Now she looked up with excitement in her eyes. Actually, they do know how to do other things. They've just forgotten. She turned her screen around so everyone could see. Look at this. I've been analyzing the debris from their ships. Hidden in the computer systems, I found old files. Art, music, literature. From before the war. Jake leaned closer to look. The images on the screen were beautiful. Kethvar paintings that looked like flowing water, Zephyrian sculptures that seemed to dance in the light. This is incredible. There's more, Lisa continued, switching to another file. Poetry, stories, even what looks like children's games. Both species had rich cultures before the war destroyed everything. Amy stood up suddenly. That's it. That's what we need to do. What do you mean? Jake asked. We help them remember who they used to be, Amy said, her voice getting excited. Before they were enemies, they were artists and explorers and inventors. We help them find that again. Tony scratched his head. How do we do that? Just show them some old pictures? No, Lisa said, understanding Amy's idea. We get them to create together. Kethvar and Zephyrians working on the same projects. Jake felt a spark of hope. You think that could work? It's worth trying, Amy said. What's the worst that could happen? They refuse to cooperate? 2 days later, Jake found himself on a Kethvar ship for the first time in his life. Admiral Vextar had agreed to let the humans visit, but he didn't look happy about it. Your people are causing problems, Vextar said as he led Jake through the corridors. My soldiers don't understand why we're not fighting. Maybe that's a good thing, Jake replied. Maybe they're tired of fighting. Vextar stopped walking and turned to face Jake. You don't understand. War is all we know. Without it, we are nothing. You're wrong, Jake said gently. You're so much more than that. He pulled out a tablet and showed Vextar some of the art Lisa had found. The Admiral's yellow eyes widened as he recognized the ancient Kethvar symbols. Where did you find this? Vextar whispered. On your own ships, Jake said. Hidden in old computer files. This is what your people created before the war. This is who you really are. For the first time since Jake had met him, Vextar looked something other than tired. He looked amazed. Meanwhile, Tony was visiting the Zephyrian fleet with a different mission. He had brought along some of the engineering problems that both fleets were facing. Broken life support systems, damaged navigation equipment, worn-out ship engines. These problems affect both our fleets, Tony explained to a group of Zephyrian mechanics. What if we work together to fix them? The blue-skinned aliens looked at each other uncertainly. Work with the Kethvar? One of them asked. That is impossible. Why? Tony asked. You're both good engineers. You both need the same repairs. It makes sense to help each other. They are our enemies, another Zephyrian said, but he didn't sound as sure as he had expected to. Are they? Tony asked. Or are they just people with the same problems you have? It took 3 more days of careful talking, but eventually Tony managed to arrange the first joint repair mission. A Kethvar engineering team and a Zephyrian repair crew would work together to fix a damaged space station that both fleets used for navigation. Jake watched the meeting through video feed, holding his breath. The 2 groups of aliens stood on opposite sides of the station's main room, staring at each other with suspicion and fear. This is not going to work, Amy muttered beside him. But then something unexpected happened. One of the Zephyrian engineers pointed to a broken control panel and said something in the universal trade language. A Kethvar mechanic looked at the panel, nodded, and started working on it. Within an hour, both teams were working side by side, sharing tools and ideas. They didn't talk much, but they didn't fight either. They just focused on solving the problems in front of them. Well, Tony said over the radio, that's a start. Lisa's cultural exchange program took longer to organize, but when it finally happened, the results were amazing. She had set up virtual galleries where both species could share their old art and music without having to meet face to face. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of Kethvar and Zephyrians logged into the galleries, seeing their own history and their enemy's culture for the first time in centuries. Look at this, Lisa called excitedly, showing Jake her computer screen. They're starting to comment on each other's art. Listen to this message from a Kethvar artist. I remember my grandmother singing this song. I thought it was lost forever. Jake read more of the messages. Zephyrians were asking questions about Kethvar poetry. Kethvar were complimenting Zephyrian sculptures. For the first time in 3,000 years, the 2 species were having conversations that weren't about war, but not everyone was happy with these changes. Captain, Beth called urgently from her station. I'm picking up encrypted communications from both fleets. Some of the military leaders are not pleased with what's happening. Jake's heart sank. What kind of communications? Plans for an attack, Beth said grimly. There's a group of Kethvar war leaders who think Admiral Vextar has gone soft, and some Zephyrian battle commanders who want to eliminate the human mediators. Amy looked up from her work. How long do we have? According to these messages, they're planning to strike during the cultural festival Lisa organized for tomorrow. Jake felt cold. The festival was supposed to be the crowning achievement of their peace efforts. Representatives from both species were going to meet in person for the first time in centuries, not to fight but to share their art and stories. We have to warn them, Jake said. Warn who? Tony asked. The people planning the attack won't listen to us. And if we tell Vextar and Thala, it might start a civil war in both fleets. Jake stared out the window at the stars. 3 weeks of progress, 3 weeks of hope, and now it might all be destroyed by people who couldn't imagine a world without war. No, he said finally. We're not giving up. Not now. What do you want to do? Amy asked. Jake turned to face his crew. We're going to that festival, all of us, and we're going to make sure it happens no matter what. Captain, Lisa said quietly, if those hardliners attack during the festival, a lot of innocent people could die. Then we'll have to make sure they don't attack, Jake replied. Or if they do, we'll be ready for them. Tony smiled grimly. So we're going to protect both Kethvar and Zephyrians from their own military leaders? That's exactly what we're going to do, Jake said. Because someone has to show them that there's a better way to live than constant war. As his crew prepared for what might be their most dangerous mission yet, Jake looked out at the space where two fleets had learned to work together for the first time in 3 millennia. Tomorrow would decide whether that cooperation could survive, or whether the cycle of endless war would claim them all. The cultural festival was beautiful. Jake stood on the observation deck of the neutral space station, watching as Kethvar and Zephyrian civilians mingled together for the first time in 3,000 years. Children from both species played games together while their parents shared food and stories. Hard to believe these people were enemies just a month ago, Amy said, standing beside him. Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on the security monitors. Somewhere out there, hardline military leaders from both fleets were planning an attack. He could see their ships on the long-range sensors, moving closer to the station. "Tony, what's the status on the station defenses?" Jake asked into his communicator. "Not good," Tony's voice crackled back. "This is a civilian station. It was never meant to withstand a military attack." Lisa joined them on the observation deck, her face glowing with happiness. "Jake, you should see what's happening down in the main hall. A Kethavar poet is reading her work and half the audience is crying, including the Zephyrians." "That's wonderful," Jake said, though his eyes never left the security screens. "But we may have bigger problems soon." Before Lisa could ask what he meant, the station's alarms began to sound. Beth's voice came over the intercom system. "All hands to emergency stations. We have incoming hostile ships. Both Kethvar and Zephyrian military vessels are approaching with weapons charged." Panic spread through the festival crowd. Parents grabbed their children, and people began running toward the escape pods. But there weren't enough pods for everyone, and Jake knew it. "Amy, get down to the main hall," Jake ordered. "Help organize the evacuation. Tony, meet me in the control room. We need to buy these people time to escape." As Jake ran through the corridors toward the control center, he passed groups of terrified civilians. But something strange was happening. Instead of Kethvar and Zephyrians fleeing separately, they were helping each other. He saw a Zephyrian father carrying a wounded Kethvar child. A group of Kethvar engineers were showing Zephyrian families how to operate the escape pods. In the control room, Tony was frantically working at the defense console. "The attackers will be in firing range in 5 minutes, he reported. "I count 6 Kethvar warships and 4 Zephyrian destroyers." They're working together, Jake realized. The hardliners from both sides are cooperating to destroy the peace process. Beth looked up from her communication station. "I'm getting messages from Admiral Vextar and Supreme Commander Thilla. They're trying to stop the attack, but the rogue ships won't respond to their orders." Jake grabbed the microphone. "This is Captain Morrison of the USS Endeavor to all attacking vessels. There are civilians on this station, innocent people who have done nothing wrong." A harsh voice responded over the radio. "Human, you have poisoned our people with your talk of peace. War is our nature. It is what we are meant to do." "No," Jake said firmly. "War is what you've chosen to do, but you can choose something else." "We choose to end this foolishness," came another voice, this time from the Zephyrian ships. "Our people will remember their strength when they see your weakness destroyed." The first missiles struck the station's outer hull. The lights flickered, and Jake felt the floor shake beneath his feet. Through the windows, he could see the attacking ships moving closer, their weapons flashing in the darkness. "Shields are down to 60%, Tony reported. "We can't take much more of this." In the main hall, Amy was helping the last group of civilians reach the escape pods when she noticed something remarkable. The mixed teams of Kethvar and Zephyrian engineers that had worked together during the past month were now cooperating to repair the station's damaged systems. "We can fix the shield generators," one of the Kethvar mechanics told her. "But we need to work together, just like we did on the repair missions. The Zephyrians know how to reroute power," added a blue-skinned engineer. "And we Kethvar understand the structural repairs. Together, we can save the station." Amy smiled despite the danger. "Then let's do it." Back in the control room, Jake watched as the mixed repair teams got to work. The station's defenses began to strengthen, buying precious time for the evacuation. But the attackers weren't giving up. More missiles struck the station, and Jake could see that the hull was starting to crack in several places. "Captain," Beth said urgently, "I'm getting a new signal. It's Admiral Vextar and Supreme Commander Thilla. They're coming to help us." On the main screen, Jake could see two fleets approaching from different directions. The loyal Kethvar and Zephyrian ships were moving to intercept the attackers. "This is Admiral Vextar to all rogue vessels," came the familiar voice over the radio. "Stand down immediately. You are attacking innocent civilians." "Admiral, you have forgotten your duty," replied one of the attacking Kethvar commanders. "We are warriors. We do not make peace with our enemies." "Maybe," Vexitar said slowly. "It is time to remember that we are more than just warriors." The space around the station erupted into battle, but this time it was different. Instead of Kethavar fighting Zephyrians, it was moderates from both sides fighting against extremists from both sides. Jake watched in amazement as Vextar's ships and Thilla's vessels worked together, protecting the station and its civilian population. "The war. Rogue ships are retreating," Tony reported. "They're outnumbered now." But the real victory was happening inside the station. The mixed repair teams had not only fixed the damage, but had done something unprecedented. They had created a new type of technology by combining Kethvar and Zephyrian engineering methods. "Look at this," Lisa said excitedly, showing Jake a technical readout. "The repair teams didn't just fix the station, they made it better. The combined technologies are more efficient than either species could create alone." As the last of the attacking ships fled into deep space, Jake made his way back to the main hall. The festival was over, but something more important had begun. He found Admiral Vexitar and Supreme Commander Thilla standing together, looking out at their combined fleets through the station's large windows. "I never thought I would stand beside a Zephyrian as an ally," Vextar said quietly. "Nor I beside a Kethvar," Thilla replied. "But today we fought together to protect something more important than our old hatred." Jake approached them. "What happens now?" Vexitar turned to face him. "Now we must convince our people that there is a better way to live. It will not be easy. Many still believe that war is our only purpose, but today proved that cooperation works better than conflict," Thilla added. "Our people saw it with their own eyes. They worked together, fought together, saved lives together." Over the following weeks, Jake watched as the galaxy began to change. The Spiral Accords were signed on the same space station where the festival had taken place. It wasn't a peace treaty in the traditional sense. It was something new, an agreement to work together instead of against each other. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez established the Interspecies Institute on a neutral world, where researchers from all three species worked on projects for the common good. Engineer Tony Clark became the first human to serve on a joint Kethvar-Zephyrian construction crew, building colonies on worlds that both species had once fought over. Amy Patterson was appointed as the galaxy's first director of conflict resolution, helping other species avoid the same endless war trap that had held the Kethvar and Zephyrians for 3 millennia. Jake stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavour, looking out at the first joint colony established by former enemies. Kethvar and Zephyrian families lived side by side, their children playing together in streets that had been built by cooperative effort rather than conquered by force. "Captain," Beth called from her station, "we're getting a message from Earth. They want to know how we managed to end a 3,000-year war." Jake smiled. "Tell them we didn't end the war. We just reminded two civilizations that they had a choice. They could keep fighting until they destroyed each other, or they could choose to build something better together." He updated his log one final time. "Today I learned that the most powerful weapon against endless conflict isn't superior firepower or brilliant strategy. It's simply refusing to accept that war is the only option. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is prove that peace is possible." Outside his window, former enemies worked together under alien suns, building a future that neither species could have imagined alone. The cycle of endless war was finally broken, not by force, but by the simple human belief that there was always another way.